Nothing new, huh? Plyometrics for distance, one-legged squats. The first African-American physical educator. You should know this guy. Very heroic figure. Name was Aaron Molyneux Hewlett. 1858. He's the head of the Harvard College gym. I'm kind of a monotone presenter, so if you feel like going to sleep, just go right ahead, we'll wake you. All right? It's late in the evening. But take a look at this guy. Look at these clubs. They had to be 400, they had to be 40 pounds. Look at the size of this guy. And what are these? Can you see? Kind of light. Boxing gloves, restorative and martial. He knew both. Now this was his junior, a guy named Dudley Sargent. When Sargent then came along at Harvard, he said, well, you know what, we're studying far too much. We're getting all deformed and pre-kyphotic. So he starts creating equipment. We have extension back at the turn of the century. This was his gym. Because he was a trapeze guy, if you haven't figured that out. Had trapezes all over the place. He was a circus guy. That's out at Harvard. 10 women, unassisted, over the wall. Pretty good standard, huh? Try that tonight. This is a mace, very similar to the Indian club. This is a pretty heavy mace, but yet the women were using them. And here's a woman climbing back here. This is performance standard, really high performance standard. This is about 1860. This is German, about the same time. This is from your library here at Averett. We found these clubs and that little notation there saying that this was done, much of this was done then here at Averett at the turn of the century. Rope jumping. Now, take a look. This is 1860s. Look at what they're wearing. She's wearing a corset. Can you believe it? She's wearing a corset. But look at the size of those Indian clubs. She was not kidding. Zander, Gustav Zander. When what was the guy's name? The Nautilus machine guy, Jones. When Arthur Jones says, if I would have known about Gustav Zander, it would have saved me decades of training. Now that's a rumor. I don't know if he really said that, but somebody that he knew told me that. But either way, Gustav Zander did some amazing stuff. This is Catherine Beecher, 1860s, I believe. She said, get out of those corsets. They're killing you. Maybe someone out here in the audience will become today's Catherine Beecher and say, get out of those high heels. They're killing us. Pretty cool, huh? This is out in Washington State, I believe. Now these are called window ladders, and you weave through these. This is partner weaving, where they're going up the ladder in serpentine formations where she crosses and she crosses the other way. 1901 medicine ball. This is Averett's 1903 basketball team. Pretty cool, huh? Now, what do you notice about this? They're not looking off in some other direction. They're focused on what they're doing. The teacher is positioned properly. The hands are up over the ladder. The spotters are right in place. They all look alike, don't they? They were teaching toward a standard for performance. And that's the precision, right? Progression, variety, and precision. And look at the quality of this stuff. We would say today, oh, women aren't going to be vaulting off of the pommel horse. They can't do that. Somehow they did it. Same thing on the ladder. You see the identical positioning? Pressing on the inside of the thigh, pressing out on the feet, pressure here, full extension. There was a technique to everything they did. If anybody here was ever taught by nuns, now I'm old and I went to a Catholic elementary school, and they could hit so hard. And I always wondered how, and when I saw this picture I thought, you know what? They trained for it. Look, they had a punching bag back there. They were getting ready to beat the crap out of us, I thought. Look at that, ladders and... Well, then in 1920, something happened. We abandoned all of those systems. We threw them away. We denounced them. We said that's formal gymnastics. Sports and games became the dominant physical culture of our country. And we began to dismantle these other systems. See, by 1913, you see the technical quality is lacking. See that? Some of these movements. Look how ugly that is. That's 1913. Very ugly. There are 10,000 kids out there, but the precision was dying. The mindfulness. It held on. I think the women, I suppose we could say the women held on a little bit longer. This is the University of Iowa. That's called calisthenic. It means beautiful strength. That's calisthenic. And this is another school. I just went through the archives and found these. This is all considered men's stuff these days, but look at that. They were doing it. How you like their uniforms? Pretty hot, huh? Like, you know, really cool Aikido-looking bloomer types. Nice. Well, here's what happened. They started making fun of anybody who went to these gyms. So this is a caricature, a satire of people who go to gyms, and it appeared in a magazine in the 1930s. So the social pressure against fitness was really pronounced. Like, this is pretty cool. It is pretty funny, though. And these morons, you know, and the guy getting hit with the clubs. I mean, they were relentless in making fun of these people. Fat guy breaking the trapeze. And they really hammered women. The idea here was say, look, don't you get enough work just cleaning? Do you have to use bowling pins for Indian clubs? And do you really have to press your baby? You know, it really made fun of you know, do I have to climb the rope when I'm sewing? So there was a lot of satire against people who exercised between 1920 and 1941. This was a satirical magazine at the time, and they really hammered club swinging. So by 1927, look how ugly these lines are. This was a demonstration of gymnastics. This is gone. 1927, so it's over. So the gyms became this. And then where did the teachers go? They got kicked outside onto the playgrounds. So it lasted through the 1920s and 30s. But you look carefully at the positioning of these youngsters. They're comfortable where they are because there were teachers out there showing them to do these things. They didn't do this on their own. They were playing on this, but they had skill. And this is a German system. You notice too, they're totally integrated. The Germans said, look, we're all Americans, we're all here, and that's how they treated everyone. But they did separate the boys and the girls. They felt that at the later ages it was much more comfortable for the boys and girls to train on the gymnastics separately. YMCA still did a lot of boxing. Walter Camp, you ever heard of him? Football, big football name, Walter Camp? Nah. Anyway, he tried to get us doing calisthenic again, so he called it the Daily Dozen. So whenever you hear the term the Daily Dozen, it was Walter Camp. So the 20s were quirky. They were real quirky times for fitness, like this sort of stuff. But they did have inline skates. They were pretty hip in that way. They had the early inline skates. Well, this is what happened, isn't it? What happened then? A lot of attention on personal and on pedagogical. We began to see a shift on how our physical culture was heading. This guy, you ever heard of the York Barbell Company? Oh, York Barbells? This was Bob Hoffman who created that company in Strength and Health magazine. Little known, he was a World War I combat veteran, and although he was the first Olympic weightlifting coach, he also knew that the Germans and the Japanese were coming. And he kept warning in his magazine, they're coming, and you guys aren't ready. And the Germans and the Japanese were training all the way through the 30s. And now the Army held on a little bit longer, this 1925, than others. But now this guy here, Thomas Cureton, he's the father of physical fitness. And unfortunately, it's war and loss of life that often wakes us up to the fact that we're not physically prepared. It's very unfortunate, but that's the truth. Basically says, in 1947, we're unfit. So whenever you have old people like me talking about how fit we were and how we played when we were young, just nod politely, but don't believe it. We've been on a slide for generations. We've been getting less and less fit. Now, the women during World War II stood up and said, we have a problem here, and we have to help win this war. So Mabel Lee, I consider her the most influential physical education teacher of the 21st century. She worked on the Women's Army Corps, and she said, first thing to look at is the way you carry yourself. First thing. Just like Thomas Cureton said, physique, organic function, and motion. Take a look at the way you carry yourself. They had to rebuild their calisthenic programs. They got really good at it. World War II. And so if I was 41 years old when the war started, what year was I born? That's an easy one. The year the war started in 1941. I was born in 1900 then, wasn't I? So I would have had access to those older systems like Mabel Lee. So people who didn't have a voice between 1920 and 41 were called upon to get us fit again. And then to start with basic movement, just like Gray and Dr. Burton have been talking about, fundamental movement patterns. They had to teach them how to push again, how to jump. They had to teach them how to jump. And boy, did that generation get strong. Unbelievable. Now this guy, by the way, his name is Charles McCloy, and his teacher was a guy named Dudley Sargent, and Sargent was a junior of Hewlett, and my teachers were trained by this guy. So tonight, you have a lineage of teachers. So if I'm militant about all of this, it's because I've been influenced by this guy, who is a real militant physical educator. He helped rebuild the World War II PT. Old beat-up Indian clubs made out of blocks. 400-pound log. No mistakes, please. Pay the price. Squatting to shoot. Try that one. I served in the infantry in the 60s, and we started when I came in, but we had so many people that would fire their weapon and fall backward. I think they took it out during that period because they don't do it anymore. Climbing. You've seen these things turn in circles. There's competition of them now for them out there. They were used in the Army for spatial orientation. Climbing, more climbing, lots of off-the-ground training. Where would these youngsters have learned some of this stuff? You saw it, it was outside. It's on those playgrounds. So they didn't come in cold. A lot of them learned this stuff. Tough war. They needed mobility. Very functional again now. So this hand balancing and all of this sort of stuff caught on again during World War II. That's the San Quentin hand balancing team in the prison. It got a little bit crazy too, didn't it? Went to the high schools. High schools were doing hand balancing. Functional, real functional body weight. High schools built this stuff.